So, hello and welcome to episode 52. And I think I have got somebody that I've always wanted to have on this show because जो हमारी जुगलबंदी है, right? It has been incredible. We've known each other for almost 12 years now,
Yeah.
right? And none other than Anand Kumar from Pier Counsel. Anand has had a very interesting career. Do not go on the young looking face. Anand has been part of the startup ecosystem from the very start, right? 2008, I think, when you started. But Anand and I go back a very long time. Anand and I have been, we were working on a transaction together about 12 years ago, and we became friends. And then we traveled to Bhopal together. We had to get another transaction through. Both not in the startup space, right?
Yeah.
In hardcore, infrastructure projects. And since then, we've been really good friends. We've traveled the world together. In fact, the only time I've seen the Taj Mahal was with actually Anand. So without further ado, I want to introduce Anand Kumar of Pier Counsel to the podcast. Welcome, Anand. How are you feeling?
Great. I mean, that was such a great introduction. Edie.
But Anand, I mean, coming back, I think we've known each other, like I said, from Mumbai Angel days.
Right.
I think we met. We did not actually meet because of Mumbai Angels, but we
Yeah.
did some transactions because of Mumbai Angels.
That's
'Cause I
right.
think at that time,
Yeah.
your law firm was repping
Yep.
all the transactions from Sand Hill Council.
That's right.
And did you ever imagine 11, 12 years later we would be still getting on a podcast together?
No, not really. In fact, I was very elated when you told me that this, this is going to happen. And I was so looking forward to it. And here we are.
I know, and we just started, right? And I'm so glad to have you on the show. Anand, today we're going to take this journey, right? From Anand starts from a family that was is involved in the in Indian administrative services,
Right.
And he then became a legal professional. He's worked with some of the top legal minds in the country, and then went on to become one of the startup lawyers. Actually, he's very widely known for the number of startups he's actually repping and even working with the kind of funds he is, and to becoming a super angel.
Yeah.
And it's been quite the joy. I'm sure that throughout this journey there are some joy, there are the heartaches, there's some fun, there's some farce, and there's just some bloody hell fugly things that we need to talk about. So, looking forward to that conversation. Anand, are we ready? Should we go ahead?
Yeah, Edie. Absolutely. Let's go ahead.
So, Anand, I went through your LinkedIn. You completed your LLB in 1997. Like I
Yes.
said, do not go on the youngest looking face. This man graduated in 1997.
Yeah.
2 years before I finished my 10th,
Yeah.
by the way.
Wow. Really?
So,
That's amazing.
from Delhi University, and then started under Bhargav Desai in
Yeah,
1998.
Yeah.
And then Fox Mandal Little in 2003, Desai and Divanji in 2005, before starting out as a partner on his own in 2008. Just wanted to know, like, what was your motivation for taking up the legal profession?
Yeah. So very interesting. You asked me this question. Let me just take you backwards because now since you mentioned Delhi University, so Delhi University is full of wisdom, right? So imagine like everybody wants to become a bureaucrat, despite knowing the fact that they'll be using the same file because there are no fans to fan themselves because it's so hot all across the country. So from there, coming and leaving the bureaucracy because all my friends were joining, they were just, writing for civil services, IAS, and all that. So I had to literally tear myself apart to and goad myself towards law. So that in itself was a very interesting journey. So anyway, I decided to go there, and I still remember my mother saying that do something interesting. You just have one bike, and you go from one panwala to another panwala. You should be doing something more interesting. Why don't you take civil service? And civil services was like it was like an heirloom. Everybody has to get into that. So I left that and joined law as a profession. Found it to be very interesting later on. And since I had a background of political science, as I graduated in political science. So with the trappings of international policy and politics and all that, that had kind of helped me to get into law as a profession. Then now once you join the profession, now where do you go? That time there was no clarity whether because those were the days, AD, when it was a different world. I mean, it was like, for example, law as a profession and the whole thing. Like, there was so much of unrest in the country, even in terms of,
Absolutely.
there used to be agitations. People were like, joblessness. India as a politically also, we just had, as far as our FDI goes, it was just few weeks.
Yeah. I think we had multiple prime ministers.
Yeah, multiple prime ministers. Our forex reserves, then our depleting forex, all of that. So amidst that, it was very difficult for anybody to take this kind of a call. So anyway, but I told you, Delhi University was full of wisdom, and one thing about DU was very interesting. One thing it taught me is that do the most important thing, which is most important. So you have to do it first.
Right.
If something is important, you have to just do it, and then graduated on to law, joined some of the best minds in the legal profession and luminaries, you said, including Mr. Desai in Supreme Court. And so I had to kind of shuttle between the High Court and Supreme Court and district courts. So that's where I got the understanding of how it works, especially going to the lower court, understanding how the evidence is led, what evidence is all about. Because that's the most important thing. Even now, I'm like a corporate lawyer now, but understanding how it works in terms of what are the important things in a document, how, that becomes certain things which you choose to ignore becomes one of the most important things.
Anand, when we were discussing, right, ki when you have been through you worked with Desai and Devanji, you've been through court for such a long time before you actually start drafting, and today you're a corporate lawyer. इसका एक फर्क पड़ता है, right? Because when you are talking, when we are discussing agreements today, we're obviously going with the intent that if this has to go to court,
correct,
like 99 times out of 100 ऐसा नहीं होगा, but correct, if it does have to go to court, it has to still pass the muster, correct, of the lower court का जो judge है.
Absolutely.
It has to pass the muster with them, right? And you have to start drafting agreements not only with passing the muster with them, correct, but also the appeals that this thing might have to go through.
Absolutely. No, right? That's a very, very good question. And I think that these questions should get asked more and more.
Correct.
Especially when imagine like the startup where they just work on a very small bandwidth. They don't have so much of mind space to give on the legal stuff and all. And imagine these. Let's say some of these founders dispute which we see happening rampant, right?
We're going to talk about that in more detail.
Right. Yeah. So when it gets taken in the court of law, and you've not applied your mind, you've just put something like a New Year's resolution, right, which is meant to be broken. So that's the biggest problem, So that becomes very, very important because a lot of these things have to be led as an evidence in the court of law. So even if the guy is on the right side, he goes on a sticky wicket because whoever has advised him, maybe they don't understand that or they have not practiced that. So I think it's a very, very important, if there's a blend of both litigation and corporate, it's very important, at least in India, because these things become so important. Evidence, how the judge is looking at the document, how you have to interpret while correct, you are formulating the draft or drafting the
because the arguments you can do outside the court, they may all sound great.
दलीलें
आपको कोर्ट में देनी पड़ती है वो सेम नहीं होती
because वो consider भी नहीं करेगा. Judge is not even bothered. Correct. I mean, sometimes it happens that the guy, while he is doing something, he's not bothered. He's just giving his signing authority to somebody else, and people just keep on copying that signature. Imagine if, and it has happened with us in many of these arbitration cases, by the way. Yeah, because the founders think that, look, I don't have time. I'm just sub-delegating or delegating it to somebody who is signing on my behalf. Tomorrow, when it gets challenged or the document is being admissible in the court of law, what will you say? And if you've not been educated about it. So I think forget about lawyers, even everybody else needs to be educated about all these things. Because there are certain things, list of things you can't do.
Correct.
So I think that this becomes very, very important actually.
Wow. Any case, before we get into a little bit more about, how you got into the startup ecosystem,
right?
But any case that left a very deep impact on you? I know we've talked about many of them.
We've
talked about, but any case that you could remember that left a deep impact on you?
Yeah, I mean, I was part of this Lord Swaraj Paul versus MD Jindal case. I was working in a firm and I was part of that. And I think, that has kind of every element which was involved in that.
Achha.
So the fight was basically between these two stalwarts, and I'm not going to get into too much of
Yeah.
detail, but eventually what the kind of instructions we got is that make sure that the case is filed, हर गली में case file करना है.
अच्छा.
ऐसा कोई कोर्ट नहीं होगा जहाँ पे कि हमें नहीं फाइल करना इनके अगेंस्ट पे. So the dispute really went in proportions. So that I saw. So we saw the district courts, the high court, then how the high court is. Then there was criminal elements involved, civil case was there. There were also interpretations as per the Companies Act. Eventually, I mean, it did get resolved, but it had all kind of interesting elements in that case.
So I'm guessing court does not look like what you see in the Bollywood movies.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
So let's talk about how you got into this startup ecosystem, right? Because if you go back to 2008, तब तो startup क्या होता था लोगों को पता भी नहीं था, right?
I mean, 2008 तक, I mean, it had started kind of formulating because Mavericks were there, internet had come.
हाँ.
Like.
But फिर भी वो culture तो था नहीं, मतलब
था नहीं.
थोड़े बहुत.
मतलब earliest if I can, मुझे लगता है कि इंडिया में 2000 में what started was, I think TIE started in India also, chapter in 2000.
Correct. I think
Like nobody knew
Rediff
about
also went big in 99, 2000. And
correct.
These kind of,
So they were the really old stalwarts would be there, but essentially nobody even knew what it is to what it is today. Like, imagine if nobody could even ever consider that entrepreneurship could be a career.
Correct.
Right? If they go home and say that, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I mean, imagine what you're going
Isn't
to
it
get.
crazy how the SHAs have evolved? मेरे को लगता है उस time के SHAs, and I've read some of them, right?
Yeah.
इतने stringent.
Yeah.
I think if founders read this today, you'd be like, ये क्या लिखा है, right?
Correct. And not only that those SHA also used to look very much like a petition rather than SSA. So it's both the ways.
Yeah.
It had so much influence of the litigation on them versus today, which is a mixed blend of,
क्योंकि उस time I think even there was no belief in entrepreneurship, ना लगता था कि भाई जो भी founder है वो तो ऐसे ही चोर है.
हाँ.
Right. I mean there was a belief at that time.
Correct.
Right? Even listed space में there was the belief, and then unlisted तो was even considered to be more unorganized at that point. But did you envision, like, first of all, before we go there, what made you get into the startup space?
Yeah.
Because it was not big enough to say I can make a career here.
Correct.
Right? But you did take on the challenge.
Correct.
And you decided to become a corporate lawyer, and that too startup specific.
Correct.
Was there somebody who convinced you? What got you in here?
Correct. Actually, I mean, as I told you that, I was in the university which had wisdom all around. So Delhi University is unbelievable certain times. Like, you ask somebody that, I remember, if you ask a fruit vendor, fresh fruit है क्या, तो बोला कि हाँ कश्मीर चले जाओ वहाँ मिल जाएगा. So somewhere these things used to, and there was like so much stuff happening around you, right? So कहीं ना कहीं लगता था कि something is going to happen big in this country.
Correct.
We can't go like this, right? And then
you're talking about the disorganized state
of affairs, and reading up on stuff, because somewhere I knew that technology is going to change
Correct.
the course of this country, because that's the only option left. I mean, if you want fresh fruit, you don't have to go to Kashmir. Yeah.
Correct.
You can always, something has to change that, right? So I'm just giving a certain example, like so I think that was always there, and eventually what happened that I moved to Bombay, and then I got into the hallowed sandhill sort of a road in the Silicon Valley. So that when I saw first time, my eyes popped out. That wow, like I remember I was sitting in
you had an office in Silicon Valley.
No, that time we did not. But first time when I had gone to visit there, and I was sitting in University Cafe in Palo Alto, and I was told that that every guy who is sitting here has a term sheet in his back pocket.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, and this I'm talking about in year 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And by that time we had figured out a small office garage, literally a garage on Pochkanwala Road.
Acha, that's how you started.
That's how we started. So and it was called Sandhill that time, because we just, as I told you, the hallowed Sandhill Road, right? So that had to be brought in India, and we took the cudgels to bring that in India. And it started, and eventually, I mean, I never knew that it's going to go so big in Bombay even.
Correct.
When it all started. Like, Mumbai Angel, the VC was shaping up. Probably one of the first and we were part of Mumbai Angel when it was getting formulated.
Correct.
We were doing
Sasha
was there, and we were doing the legal documents, and Sasha, Shantanu, then I think Prashant Choksi, Manish, a lot of people were there. So that's where the whole angel community was also coming up, and we got involved. One of the first investment of Mumbai Angel was in Mobi.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was M-Coach that time.
M-Coach, right. What a journey.
What a journey.
Did you invest?
I think we all invested a small amount, and we were all kicked out.
Acha.
Yeah, when Sherpalo came into that.
Okay.
And I think that was that's something which we realized. Oh my God, I think it was 5x or 6x. So whoever has put in 1 lakh got 5 lakh or something.
And you were very happy.
Oh, they were extreme.
And then very sad after that.
Very sad when we think about it in past. Yeah.
But did you envision that the startup? I mean, think 2008, right? Let's go back there. Did you envision that 15 years later we would be having this kind of scale in the country? It was one thing. Yes, we had to solve things, but the kind of scale that we've achieved.
No, this definitely not. I could not envision, because, I never realized that there'll be so much money chasing here. Wow. That is something which I never had in mind. It was like, like I told you, like Sandhill Road, for example, Sandhill Road was for an entrepreneur, it was a dream come true.
Correct.
Like for any actor, Hollywood Boulevard is a dream come true. For a stockbroker, Wall Street is a dream come true. We did not have anything in India.
Correct.
We had nothing. It was
now we have HSR layout.
Yeah. But something like that, and so from that world to this world, and the way things would emerge. Now, to answer your question, no, I never envisioned that this is going to shape up like this.
Correct. And we've talked about this quite a bit, but considering the volume that we've received, do you think we're prepared to deal with the kind of complexities of transactions that we're seeing today?
Mm-mm. Well, not only that, I'll answer that question. I don't even see startups. We need so many more startups, AD,
correct,
if you ask me. And I feel that most of these startups have not been able to still solve the problems. Like one, I remember, like, I'll give you a funny example. When I was a kid, I used to sit in a salon. So, they used to have those pictures with, those Hollywood, Bollywood guys with the hairstyle. And I used to look at that and I used to think that what's the use of this guy? Can this ever happen? Because the guy comes, he just cuts my hair and then he just called Katora cut. And he'll just say, okay, buzz off. But eventually, when in Bombay, I was working on a transaction, and when he told me, Dharmen Manwani, he started something called, he got JCB in India, John Claude Begin.
Yeah, right.
So, that was like a wow moment for me. Oh, really? That's something which I thought can happen here. And the first time I saw the size and scale of salons which started coming, it was very nice to work with DM. And so, stuff like that. And similarly,
incremental changes everywhere they were seeing.
Everywhere. Things like, you come from a world where you cannot explain anybody what is software.
Correct.
To an extent that, things started popping out here and there and all of that. So yes, at certain times we were much ahead of the curve, but what happened that eventually, the whole sort of ship moved.
Correct.
With the VCs coming in, the stakeholders. The policy was not there. So many of things which are today, it wasn't there like what it is today. But yeah, then it started shaping up eventually.
But do you think today, because the number of transactions, even this year we're expecting 25 billion in investment in India.
Yeah.
But now you're hearing all these issues coming out of corporate governance issues and startup, investors fighting the founders and all kinds of, structures and trying to claw back shares, all that stuff.
Right.
Eventually you can blame everybody, but do you think we have enough legal professionals in the country that can actually service the kind of transactions that are coming their way with the kind of legal knowledge that you currently have? Or not just, I'm just saying that I could say, personally I feel that maybe there might be 500 lawyers in India.
Correct.
That truly understand what goes into an SHA.
That's right. I was recently reading the almanac of Naval Ravikant,
Yeah.
right? Which talks about this whole sort of startup ecosystem. Something he says very interesting is that it's that if somebody goes deep down and instead of just scale, so somebody goes deep down and understand what it is all about, that and the return which you can get out of that. So just applying that, I mean, I don't see many of forget about just lawyers. Many of these guys, they just don't understand. So eventually it will, but but the kind of disputes which are happening. Imagine the number of startups today. What we have, like what 90,000?
Yeah, almost 90,000.
90,000 startups, and we've had like 100+ unicorns.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know how many people even really understand the meaning of a unicorn.
Correct.
Really, if you ask me, just for saying unicorn versus understanding it, so many startups. The number of exits, 200+ exits have happened, or even
Correct.
more than that. So these
The amount of M&A transactions that are
amount
going
of
on.
M&A transaction, we are having the kind of look at these fintechs. Yeah, I mean, I think the last I was reading somewhere was 40 billion worth amount got settled on in one of these fintech companies.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we'll have to cut this because I was dovetailing it towards something else, but it did not happen. Huh?
So, but let's talk about
Yeah.
what Pier Counsel does, right? Now that it's called Pier Counsel, why the name Pier Counsel? I understand now Sandhill.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
why Pier Counsel?
So what happened that Sandhill, we did have that name, but then we realized that there were certain conflicting issues and conflicting names with the same name. So we moved towards Pier Counsel and realized Pier is everywhere, all across the world, including Silicon Valley, where there's Pier 39 is a very popular place. So I just decided to call it Pier, and that's how Pier started.
And what kind of transactions are you doing at Pier Counsel?
Well, it's venture, all venture deals. We are also doing a lot of cross advisory,
Achha.
which is our specialty, because now we are one of those boutique firms who have speciality now in this, because the kind of number of transactions we have done, the kind of advisories we have given for so many number of years. So kind of we sort of claim the domain.
And I think, because I think again you and I have worked on so many transactions together, I think one of the first issues that were brought up to you was in 2015, and we've worked on multiple very interesting and intriguing issues. And one thing we've always sort of got deep on, and I think it's showing up even more and more today, is this whole co-founder conflict.
Correct.
Right? We've seen obviously that many of the unicorns actually have also had these kind of conflicts. A recent unicorn already there was articles about how the founders had fought, and there was all kinds of legal notices flying around. We already know the public fallout of BharatPay and startups like that. Is this a recent phenomenon, or have you seen even co-founder conflicts before that?
I mean, conflicts has been part and parcel of every society, but the way now I see, especially between the founders, it's like the trust is broken, and the bone starts breaking.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that, right? You can't be like. So similarly, it's like one day one guy just decides that okay, fine, I'm leaving. It's like wife saying मैं जा रही हूँ. That
Correct.
doesn't mean that okay, fine, you go. You have to sit down, do some conciliation, mediation amongst yourself. But I haven't seen the way the egos are flying all across is probably one of the reasons that this is going.
And why do you think that is such a big issue these days?
Because maybe some of these guys, they don't have a co-founder agreement also. They all of a sudden they decide to leave because they have a dream which they feel that they are not able to fulfill in a short period of time, which doesn't happen because success you don't get overnight. Right?
Correct.
So they may have certain fixated idea, which they are not able to achieve. They just decide to leave, and maybe they go somewhere else. They just leave everything as it is. So these are certain things which needs to be probably written in a contract. I haven't seen anybody doing founders agreement amongst each other, which is so important, right? What if the dispute happens amongst ourselves? How do we sort of split
Correct.
How do we give a notice to each other? There has to be some mechanism, right? A conciliation mechanism.
Because a lot of the times the founders don't even know each other before they become founders.
That's right. That's right. And that's true. And sometimes they are perforced founder. Just because there is a single founder, somebody gets him, hey, you get another co-founder and I'll fund your company.
What do you say to that?
It's just a bad idea.
Really?
Yeah, of course. Like, you cannot work like that, you know. Just because this guy is one founder, he needs one founder, it's better not to do that at all.
Yeah, actually, I feel that your co-founder is usually somebody you have to trust even more than your spouse.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you're going to spend the most amount of time with this person, and you have to really be able to back them. You can't make those relationships overnight.
Absolutely. I mean, I would go any day, AD, I would go for somebody who's like, even if I find a single guy, let's say he's failed in all his startups. He goes to a public forum. He owns that up. And he says that, okay, fine. I did it. It did not work. I just failed. I'm doing another startup. Hey, Anand, would you be interested? I would still be interested in putting money in his company. Rather than just having one founder, get him another founder.
And then they fight because once the thing starts taking off, they realize that their egos clash.
Egos clash, and egos clash is bound to happen. Now, I see it more frequently. And also, as I told you that, now we have moved, this pendulum has swung from one side to the another, to a completely another side. While earlier, people will not take as entrepreneurship as a career. Now it's become a fad.
Achha.
If you're not supposed to do entrepreneurship, you still go and do it. Just because, you feel that, you have to show it to the world. So I think that is also something which is very, very puzzling to me.
Yeah. No, in fact, I think your own journey, right? I think you started out, like you said, in the trenches in 97, 98, right? And then 2008, you finally become a partner, but it's only Pochkunwala Road mein you have a garage.
That's right.
Right? And today you may be driving an Audi Q7.
Yeah.
Right? But there was a long period there where I think, you were behind the trenches. No one actually knew.
Correct.
What you were doing and what you were all about. I think the last 4-5 years, things have changed.
Correct.
So you yourself have been on an entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
So if somebody's starting out today as a founder, right, and I know you mentor a bunch of these guys today, what do you recommend? What are the 3 things you would recommend they should do in terms of preparing for this long haul?
Well, first, they really need to solve a problem. They have to solve that.
In terms of the venture.
In terms of the venture, I mean, and there are a dime and dozen.
Correct.
There are dime and dozen problem which exists today. If somebody can solve that, there are takers. Number 1. Second, team is very important.
Correct.
They need to gel with each other. As I told you that, a guy who is honest to himself, who is honest to the company, he has to create that kind of trust.
Correct.
Amongst the investor, amongst his own founders, co-founders. And third, everything comes later, And then what I would like to see is that, you have to go deep down in what you're doing.
Correct.
You will eventually create a good product. Just me too, I think that's something which is not working out. And many of these guys, since there are so many, maybe these, forums are available to fund these, early ventures. People are just becoming wannabes.
Correct. They're just copying somebody else's idea. And
just copying somebody's ideas and just doing it for the sake of doing it.
So what do you think is the solution now? Like coming back to the idea about this co-founder conflicts that is becoming very regular. In fact, we've solved a few of them even internally, and we've had to take some extreme stances.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is also because there's this massive trust between at least both of us.
Correct.
That's led for us to at least guide the remaining founders on how to get out of a very sticky situation. What do you think is the solution to this so that it gets solved? Because, or maybe even before we go to the solution, is it because that, most founders you see in India, and this is a very India thing that you see, that they try to have this communist way of distributing equity, right? If there's 4 founders, they'll each have the same amount of equity.
Correct.
Right? Versus, the person who is the most valuable for that startup,
Correct.
having more equity than the person who, could be having less role to play.
Correct.
But it seems that everybody wants to go with this whole route of let's just eliminate the conflict by all of us having the same.
Correct.
But so effectively saying that, does a communist idea in a capitalist, structure really work? Is that one of the reasons why you see these issues cropping up?
Yeah, I mean, see, founders distribution, I mean, it, as I said that, there has to be trust. And even if, to put it the other way around, like, even if you all have 25% each, you have known each other so well, you trust each other so well, I think that still would work. But I agree with you that, just distributing equally amongst each other
To eliminate the conflict.
to eliminate the conflict is nothing but you're, rubbing it under the carpet.
Yeah.
For now, it will definitely escalate and become a problem in the future. So yeah, and
Because especially if the guy that actually, or the not the guy, but the person that actually is responsible for most of the IP.
correct.
And if that person realizes that, if I leave, because I'm at the same level as everybody else.
Correct.
The other three are rendered useless.
Correct.
Effectively, right? Because
Correct.
the person holding the Kohinoor for that
Correct.
company is gone.
Yeah.
Right. So I know we've discussed this. You discussed having a co-founders agreement.
Yeah.
What is a co-founders agreement?
See, co-founders agreement again is something which is a contract which can be entered among all the founders and co-founders when they are starting a business. So the way to handle is that you can have a conciliation mechanism. What if dispute happens? Because when your investor comes in, he will sign. Everybody is going to sign a shareholders agreement, which is eventually going to supersede your co-founders agreement also.
Correct.
That's which gets very interesting, right? So how do you sort of bifurcate this? So co-founders agreement is an agreement amongst themselves. It is a domestic agreement where you can decide that, okay, fine, let's say one guy or anybody who decides to leave the company after having vested his shares, or his shares are left unvested, how will that be treated? It should go back into a company or a trust or the ESOP. All these mechanisms. This has to be discussed, because these generally typically don't find is part of the shareholders agreement. So how will they sort of take forward the company amongst themselves? That also could be a separate agreement altogether.
Sort of a continuity agreement. Like, what happens if one of them quits?
That's right.
Then how do you take the company forward? Is this legally admissible? Is it legally?
Absolutely, yeah. See, because as I said, that typically a shareholders agreement will supersede all these agreements, but there's a way to draft this in a manner that this conflict between the co-founder gets taken care of in case somebody just wants an easy exit or just wants to leave the company. Then how do we split the equity amongst themselves? That there can always be a resolution. Nobody can stop, because if it is...
Would it also cover situations where, let's say, one of the co-founders, and we've had this situation in a portfolio company where we both are, where one of the co-founders dies, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right? And what to do in that situation? Would that also cover?
Yes, that will also cover. So these things has to be, because we are still evolving. A lot of these things get very well covered in the drafts in Silicon Valley.
Right.
They take spousal consent and all that. I'm just giving you some reference. So these things all needs to get inbuilt in our draft is also in India. We just having a normal, everybody signing the same 100-page shareholders agreement may not cover many of these issues. So we'll have to maybe, it's like we may have to tailor certain these concepts and drafts depending on how things is shaping up.
So
or
have you actually created this agreement? Is there a draft agreement you've created?
Yes, we have created it, and we have started using the drafts.
Achha.
And we're giving it to many of our clients and customers.
And so founders can reach out to you today, starting out, saying
Absolutely.
And is this going to be a standard agreement, or will you start also, I guess, modifying it or based on someone's situation?
Yeah, it does get. Of course, it does get modified depending on situation, but more or less, the concept remains the same, depending on who brings what, who brings the IP, who's the CTO, who's the CFO, or like that. So it does get modified.
And what happens in case the founders don't have any issues? What happens to that co-founders agreement?
If they don't have an issue?
Yeah.
Well, it's just a simple contract. It's like your rent agreement.
Correct. So it's basically, exactly, right? So basically, it's just covering the fact that if things go south.
That's right.
It's making sure that something is there to make sure that this is what we agreed on in case things go south, but we agreed on this when things were really going well.
Exactly.
Right? So we ensure
they need to, basically, I use that word, that they need to know that, look, this is not a New Year resolution.
Correct.
We are not we are not entering into a New Year resolution. There's something more to that. There are stakeholders. Company is a separate entity. Everybody is putting his blood, sweat. Everybody has skin in the game. They can't take it so lightly that TK resolutions are meant to be broken.
Anand, we've talked about obviously the value of having a co-founders agreement, but what is the downside of not having a co-founders agreement? Imagine a startup which has raised money, has is an actively working company, probably has some debt, probably has some customer contracts to fulfill. And then suddenly co-founders disagree leads to a situation where there's a lockout at the company, right? Things get frozen. And now, there's going to be multiple litigations, right? The investors are going to litigate, the people holding the debt are going to come in and try to take assets. And you've seen these situations recently happening quite a bit. And then customers are also coming and asking for their money back, right? Or they're asking for their contracts to get honored.
Sure.
In all this situation, not having a co-founders agreement, what are the downsides of that?
Yeah. I mean, see, conflict again will happen despite having co-founder agreement.
Correct.
That's just one of the ways you can check these kind of things from happening. But recourse, I mean, there's hardly any recourse left then. You have to, because under the shareholders agreement, because eventually everybody is a shareholder.
Correct.
So what you have to invoke is the arbitration clause. And, that is something which becomes very messy. You invoke the arbitration, everybody gets involved, and, so that is something which become very messy.
And as the promoters of the company, right, is there also, an implication on them? Because eventually they are the promoters. They are supposed to be the executive, managing the company. And now the company is facing all these losses and, money has to be given back, especially debt and especially customer deposits or customer, claims. Do these eventually come back to the promoters and possibly onto their personal assets?
Well, yeah, if they have put their neck on the line, if they have given personal guarantees as far as debt is concerned.
Correct.
So that is eventually going to come to them. They don't realize these things in the beginning. They may have signed checks, suppose, and those checks bounces, for example, because there's this very small window for startups, right? So once these things come out in the public, customers starts plugging out, revenue goes down. So eventually, it spirals and impacts the
And
whole.
can you cover these situations using a co-founders agreement stating that, one co-founder cannot lock out the company themselves?
That's right. At least, what happens that many a times when the ego clash is going on, and if you have something documented like this, there's some sanity, right?
Correct.
Which gives you certain guidelines that, okay, fine, these are the principles, which these are the basic things at least we have to adhere to. And I think that's where, if they have any sense of sanity, I think that's where these kind of agreements is going to work. I'm not talking of exceptional circumstances where, as I said, that the moment the trust is broken, the bone starts breaking. That in eventuality you cannot cover by any agreement.
Correct.
Right? But yes.
But sanity prevailing is very important.
That's right.
Now, obviously now that you've talked about Delhi University quite a bit and the fact that, what happens at Delhi University, I'm sure that you're also involved in certain acts of parliament.
Yeah. So we are very actively into the policy making. I'm also part of a member of Bombay Chamber of Commerce. I was working very closely in the last data protection bill, which was being drafted, and I was participating. We were giving our comments and all. So now obviously you have the new Personal Data Protection Act, which is there, which is different from past bill which was there.
Okay.
So
what is the differences in your
opinion? Well, there are certain basic differences, right? So for example, let's say the appellate court, which earlier was the High Court, is, I think now it's TDSAT, for example. Then also, how the I think the processing for public interest and fair and reasonable purpose, which has been provided as a ground for processing personal data by data fiduciary. It was not present in the previous draft. Similarly, under the previous draft, the obligation for to protect personal data was both on the data processor and the fiduciary. But in the new act, the obligation is limited only to the data fiduciary. Then something very interesting.
In simple terms, what does that mean?
So, for example, they have kind of the obligations they've separated, which was
for a startup founder, is the obligation on them, or is the obligation
whether that startup is a data, will that startup qualify as a data fiduciary or a data processor? That is something becomes very important.
When you look at the Data Protection Act and we look at these founders, and there's been a lot of commentary also happening that how this bill is going to affect founders. There was some commentary about how this bill also affect investors in companies.
Sure.
Right, because they're also getting access to all this data. Right. How do they protect themselves? What are the steps they have to start taking today to avoid any kind of litigation or any kind of prosecution in the future?
Yeah. So you have to the various things which are under the Data Protection Act now, right? So the appointment of a DPO, the office, the data protection processing
in every
officer,
company. Okay.
Yeah. Then you also have things like the terms of use, privacy policy, obligations. Unlike earlier, which was the differentiation between data processor and data fiduciary, now it's much more clearer in this act. Then you also need to sort of have these things very clearly laid down in your policy, in the company policies.
Okay.
What kind of data you are collecting? You have to make things very clear upfront. So these are certain things when any company, because
So
this needs a lot of sort of hand holding also.
So because the usual, I would say, laxity with at least startup founders is not to have any kind of policies around this.
Correct.
Until you are a certain size.
That's right.
Right? Do you think that needs to change?
Oh, absolutely. It has to, because there will be complete new data policy.
Okay.
So suppose if you're collecting data, if there is, let's say there is a property dealer.
Correct.
Or a real estate agent. If he is collecting data of the customers, how will he handle this data? Even this needs to go out public. Like
Okay.
what will he do with the data? So is he processing the data which he is collecting, or he is just using data
He's
in
just a
some
data
manner?
collector and somebody else is
He's just
processing.
a data collector.
And even that needs to be covered by a policy now.
That's right.
Okay.
So how is the data subject or the data principal being handled? I being the data subject, I'm giving the data. So these things have to be all very clearly laid down in your policies, terms and everything. As long as that is covered, and like, you must have seen, for example, POSH, for example,
Right.
every company now has a POSH. We've evolved since the act was passed.
Correct.
So now the committee is formulated, people are educated about it. So similarly, I think with passage of time, this will also, we also need to, and timely, this podcast is timely.
Yeah.
We need to maybe having a couple of more of them, because, we need to educate also how this whole thing will pan out.
Yeah, because I think more and more, like you said, just talked about POSH, and how now each and everything requires you to be in compliance with acts, right? And there are now specific things that you must follow, whether it is, because you've heard all those issues that where companies have gone belly up, did not pay the ESIC and all these kind of EPFO obligations got left open, and now all that is coming back to the founder, and now you obviously POSH and even MCA, all these acts.
That's right.
It's become very important for founders not to just let these things go.
You'll be surprised, Eri, a lot of people don't know. Non-filing of balance sheet, non-filing of profit and loss account. They take these things also so lightly. It's like the same New Year resolution.
Correct.
Meant to be broken. These are criminal offenses.
Correct. In fact, even TDS filing.
Even TDS filing.
Yeah. I've seen companies where they've forgotten to file TDS for, मतलब वो काट रहे थे TDS, उन्होंने deposit नहीं किया, उनको लगा किसको देना है पता नहीं.
That's what. It's so surprising. I mean, how can they be so lackadaisical about these things, which are so important?
But don't you think that is not taught in schools or colleges in India, for that matter?
Well, I think it's the attitude, if you ask me.
Achha.
That's the issue. They have to take it seriously. They need to actually sort of imbibe in their company and do it.
Correct.
As it should be sacrosanct for everybody to do that. It has to be part of your system and process.
Yeah, I think part of it also, the responsibility falls on the angel investors.
That's right.
Especially the guys who came in first, that you guide the founders, because I believe a lot of the founders in India never get educated कि TDS क्या होता है.
That's right.
At least when I went through accounting in India, हमने कभी कोई TDS deduct किया नहीं था किसी भी accounting statement बनाते समय, right? We had no TDS.
Correct.
But all these concepts and all this service tax and how GST works, and then all that stuff is very overwhelming.
Correct.
Because India, I mean, it's despite however easy it is to do business here, India is a very overwhelming country the way things run here. And I think the responsibility now falls on the early investors to put in the kind of discipline and governance.
That's
because
right.
not only is the entire system getting serious about what your regulatory filings are, and like you said, many of them can have criminal consequences.
That's right.
You're now getting new acts like POSH, like data protection, that also need to get incorporated. Maybe this is eventually going to lead to some fintech or insurance tech company coming and repping the company.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean, you've already heard that the kind of horror stories about companies that did not have directors insurance.
That's right.
Right, and that too, investor directors insurance, and then what effect that has had on the director himself.
That's right. That's true. Absolutely. So also what also becomes important is that let's say, what is the code of conduct policy, which is now I see that many companies do have. For example, your employees,
Correct.
you have to tell them that, look, this property belongs to company, this laptop belongs to company, this, you just can't take it home. Because
I heard people were actually shipping laptops at the, like, this was the concept one of the founders put out to make sure that people showed up to work when, like when you give them an offer, you also send them a laptop at the same time. Right. So, and many a time that laptop would never come back.
Right.
Because the person thought that this laptop has now come and why join?
Correct.
Right. But they said this was sort of a goodwill gesture to make sure those people came.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? Right. Like how do you recover a laptop that you have willingly giving somebody who's not joined the company?
Yeah. Unless and until it was a ploy to just, the company will use that, hey, look, the company laptop is with you, now we're going to file a case against you.
Yeah, but are you really going to go to petty court?
No, of course not.
And make recovery cases. I think these are the kind of things, like founders just take it very, very lightly.
Right.
And these kind of practices, and we were talking to Akshay in the last episode about like work from home is now becoming compulsory work from office.
Right.
And that culture is coming back, and I think many of these things need to get seriously taken up, especially as founders scale. Right, you have to get really, really serious about compliances, and and you're right. I see this far too often that founders don't take compliances seriously. They have a lackadaisical attitude towards it, and sometimes unfortunately that also causes long delays in due diligence.
Yeah,
because every follow-on investor is going to make you do the due diligence from day zero.
That's right.
And they're going to discover these things whether you like it or not.
That's true.
So have you because you're not only an investor, and we'll talk about your investor journey, you're also from the legal profession and you also do legal due diligence, right? What is the kind of framework you're putting within your own companies to ensure when they do due diligence the next time with a institution, right? And that they do not again get stuck because they did not file some form while raising money, which now is going to come back and bite them in the ass, because the compounding effect of that is probably more than the money that got raised.
Absolutely.
Right? I've heard of such horror stories also.
Yeah. So, to get those kind of offenses compounded, it's always better to nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
Because if you go for compounding those offenses, you don't even realize that it's like already, swelled and becomes so humongous.
Correct.
That you, as you rightly said, that it can be even more than the investment amount you raise.
And are you putting any kind of framework with these founders that you work with at least? You need to get serious about this?
Yeah, so, we make sure that, there are certain things which we also have a secretarial team within our office. So, we make sure that there are certain, we've created a checklist where you need to make sure that, these things are done. These are like absolute, there is no compromise.
So there is no compromise on
not at all.
Especially with this current government and the current framework, I don't think this is a no nonsense.
Correct.
Right. वो बोलते हैं ना, लकीर के फकीर टाइप है.
Correct.
जो लिखा है वो करना है. There's no two ways about it.
Absolutely.
क्योंकि there is an attitude पहले जो इंडिया में था चलता है.
हाँ.
इसको संभाल लेंगे.
बिल्कुल.
Right. Now I think that attitude has to. So what discussion we were having obviously was that you exited M-Khoj at 5x, right? Now I think better minds are prevailing that that this is not probably the time to exit. What do you think changed? What do you think is now a good time to exit a company?
Well, so I self-learned investing, and then I started contributing in my own ways, right? So I thought, I also decided, okay, fine, now let me also be a builder here.
Correct.
Like that dialogue from Guru, right, where he says ki ab main bhi business karunga.
Correct.
So I was so inspired by things which was going all around, whether and angel communities had started coming in. Squeaky we did together.
Correct.
An investment. So after that, so that time it was quite nascent, and I realized that that time was different, and people were very, very passionate. So versus now, when so much money chasing companies.
And you've also seen now more exits, right? You're now realizing the value of compounding compared to what you had.
Yeah,
earlier.
because what I have realized that I might as well wait.
Correct.
But I'll work with people who are doing the right things. That is something which is very, very, very important. So might as well wait, and if I wait, invest in companies who are doing right things, money will follow. So, and I would rather do that and go deep down in that That's what my mantra is.
So now you've scaled that, right? I mean, you've now made 40 plus investments.
Yeah.
How many exits?
I think so far I would have done around seven.
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 And which is the biggest exit so far?
The biggest has been a medtech company, if you ask me. Yeah, and that was also way back. Recently, I exited. I was also invested in City Mall last year.
Okay.
That I sold half of my investment which I had in the company.
This has been a good journey.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Yeah.
So now let's understand the thesis, because one of the things that obviously got us to this conversation was that you are now Inc. to now list you as one of the top angel investors in India, because in the first quarter of this financial year, you've done more than 12 investments, right? And this is in the middle of when everyone's talking about a funding freeze and a funding winter. You're out there writing, a check a week at this point, right? What is the thesis? Why are you so active when everybody else is not writing?
Yeah. So as I said that, this, it's not something to do with funding winter. As I said that, there could be a time when everybody is investing and I may not be investing.
Correct.
It depends on if I can find the person I told you who walks the talk, who is doing something which he should be doing, and I can work deeply with him, I will invest, whether funding winter or not. So
what's the best way to reach out to you for funding?
Well, people do reach out to me directly. They will write to me.
Is it usually on email or you prefer LinkedIn?
I prefer LinkedIn.
So DM you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's
Anand Kumar, Pier Counsel.
That's right.
Oh, you're going to get a bunch of messages after this episode. But what are the 3 investments you're most proud of? I know the exits you're always happy with exits, but what are the 3 investments you're really proud of that, I backed this thing and look at where it is?
One I would talk is Gem Pandit, which is it's a company which is selling gems online. And the guy, I remember when he started like 6, 7, 8 years back, the first day when he sold a gem for 2005 rupees, he called me for a cup of tea. He himself was shocked that he can sell a gem online.
Wow.
So today, where he has taken his business to around, I think 10 crore plus per month.
Per month. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Huge.
That's right. So, that is one. Then the medtech company, which I told you. There's another company in which I have invested, which is into SaaS, and they are doing pretty good, which also includes Birud is part of that investment, and Virud Seth. So these are some interesting investments.
Are these names you can give or you can't for the SaaS company?
Well, I can give. QuickWork is the name of the company.
And what does QuickWork do exactly?
So they're a SaaS company. They basically integrate automate various platforms and messages which are there in an enterprise all around.
Okay.
So they organize and integrate them and put it in one place.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And most of your investments are India or outside?
Few are outside also, but mostly in India.
And I noticed that some of these investments and we've done this together a couple of times where you were the lawyer and you liked the company so much you ended up investing.
That's right. That's right.
Is that the best way to get you to become an investor?
Well, not really. I mean, and there I have to be more cautious because I have to wear 2 hats, right?
Correct.
One, while the firm does the work as a law firm, and I am also just an investor. But it's good for the founders because I make sure that I talk to them on a regular basis and drive.
They're financially repped, right?
Yeah. And drive some sense on a regular basis.
They're legally repped, right? In that sense. Okay. And one recent investment that made you very excited in the last quarter, one of those 12 companies?
Well, the recent which I did, I can't name that right now, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Which space?
It's in AI.
AI?
Yeah, generative AI.
Is it ChatGPT?
Not really. I mean, apart from, every day you have now ChatGPT, you have like, Murray, you have like various others, right?
Yeah.
So, My Journey and what all.
So I wanted to ask you now, obviously you wear so many hats, right? And we'll take a little bit of a personal, because I also know you personally. You are married, have an incredibly busy lifestyle, right? Shobhana is also a high-flying corporate lawyer. You've got 2 kids together, right? And you travel.
Yeah.
We've traveled together so many places.
Yeah.
How do you find time for everything, and yet you look so young all the time?
Well, at home we don't talk business.
Acha.
Yeah. And Reyansh makes sure that I play football with him. So
Okay.
that keeps me young all the time. Weekends, he makes sure I go down with him. And yeah, we go out, we take vacations. I make sure that, we party when we have to.
Yeah, the house in South Goa definitely helps.
Yes, the Goa has kept it all us alive and young and kicking, like fun and frolic is always there.
And besides startup investments, any other investments that you do?
Not really. I mean, startup is something which is my forte.
Okay. And so, one of the questions that I've started asking now, each and every founder and even people funding them, angel investors, is, how do you believe in this concept of work-life balance? Is it possible? Is it a myth? What do you think?
Well, everything is all related, right? So as I told you that, so make sure that, money will follow you.
Correct.
As long as you've been able to build relationship with the right people.
Okay.
Who are doing right things.
Building the right relationships.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think everything will follow. Work-life relationship will also follow. The balance will be there. And so identifying the right people to work with, I think that is one of the mantras really.
Because you have to spend the most amount of time.
Most of them are there. Same thing, finding the right co-founder, having the right employees in the company. That is something which somebody needs to really be very good at it, according to me. I think that will get you everything. Otherwise, even if domestically, right? So I think these things are so important.
And I think last question before we move on to the rapid fire, right? And so you've got 2 children, and you now giving them a very varied kind of,
right.
Father's career is very, very varied, and then obviously the grandparents come from the administrative services. So as they grow up, what would you like for them to be? Do you want them to be professionals, like your legal profession? Would you encourage them to be founders? Would you encourage them to join the government? Be get in the administrative services, or would you say, beta, I made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Why don't you become investors and start running a family office? What path would you choose for them?
Well, I think it's very difficult question to answer. But as far as my son is concerned, I think it looks like he's so much inclined towards gaming.
Acha.
So it doesn't look like that he will look at anything else other than gaming, and he just loves doing it.
Like esports, basically.
Yeah, esports. Okay. And the other day he just took my laptop. He wanted to make his birthday cards for his friends, and he did a phenomenal job. I was completely shocked. I mean, I didn't know that that MacBook has so many features, which he managed to do it. So I think
they learn much faster than we do.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be something to do with IT and gaming. My daughter, she's more into. I mean, she's still in a. I mean, she's deciding what to do. She's doing she's studying her. She's still in class 12. She's doing her economics.
Would you encourage her to become a founder?
Well, I would encourage her to become a founder and not a lawyer, if you ask me.
Really?
Yeah, because yeah.
Okay. Well, good. I think it's been a very interesting journey that we've gone through. It's not your traditional journey. You've obviously donned the hat of a professional. You did that for 10 years, and you did this in a very difficult period of Indian history, right? Where today when you go to court, things are a lot more organized. You have things called e-courts, and you can find and you can get judgments and you can get everything together. You were a lawyer at the time where everything used to come in a booklet.
Yeah.
Right, and at the end of the year you had to go through all the judgments across the country.
That's right.
And even the judges would not know sometimes what other judges have passed as orders, and the lawyers have to
correct,
bring it up to them.
Correct.
Today where you have India Qanun and all these kind of websites where a lot of the data is available digitally.
Correct.
And the government is also spending money on digitizing the entire process.
Correct.
To becoming a professional, then taking up something as a moonshot, joining the after visiting Sandhill Road, joining the legal fraternity, working the legal portion of the startup journey, and then over the next 15 years having that vision to where it is today. Pier Counsel is managing so many transactions, is repping so many funds, reps so many startups, and probably that wealth of knowledge that you have actually gained over the last so many years. It really is a very interesting journey, and now you're giving back. Right now, becoming an angel, and hopefully, as you move forward, we'll hear more and more of you leading the leadership charts. Maybe You could be competing and rubbing shoulders with Kunal Shah at some point, maybe 200 startups a year. Is that something in the journey we could see?
Oh, hope so. Why
Hope
not?
so.
Thanks for the compliment.
Just don't become VCs, right?
Yeah.
We need to still keep our jobs.
yeah.
But coming now to the last section of this show, the rapid fire round. The rules are very simple. I'm going to keep popping questions to you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to think. Whatever first comes to mind,
Okay.
you go ahead and say it, and we'll see if we find something very interesting to probably end today's conversation with. So, ready for the first question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Describe your journey from a lawyer to an investor in 3 words.
Exciting.
That's 1 word.
Exciting and very exciting and very exciting.
Okay. Play it safe with blue chip companies or dive deep into early stage startups? Choice.
Dive deep with early stage.
Okay. What do you think about working from home? For it, against it?
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah.
That's not really an answer.
Well, I'm against it.
You're against it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. If law and startups were off the table, where would you find Anand Kumar today?
Startups.
No, if both were off the table, where would you find
Off the table.
Delhi University or
Goa.
Goa? Doing what?
On the beach.
On the beach.
Chilling out.
Okay. Which sector do you predict will get the most VC attention over the next decade?
I think generative AI for the next decades.
Generative AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so too. I think the power of this technology and the kind of transformative effect it has, right? It's amazing.
That's right.
I have not been so hooked on to a technology as I have been to generative AI in the last 3 months.
Yeah, because it'll come with guardrails, right?
Correct.
So because it has to, because it has a lot of downside also.
Correct.
Infringement of IP and stuff like that. But with all of that, I think it has a humongous potential.
A humongous potential.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Okay. What is your current top tool hack for managing your time or productivity?
Well,
Like, is there an app you're using or any new device that you're using that you really...
I do Yog Nidra these days.
Yog Nidra?
Yes.
How long do you sleep on Yog Nidra?
Well, it has really helped me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you doing this in the daytime or are you this in the Yog Nidra at night?
Early morning.
Early morning yoga.
Yeah.
Okay. First thing you do when you wake up?
After Yog Nidra,
Yeah, correct.
I get a cup of tea.
You get a cup of tea. Okay, wake yourself up from the Yog Nidra. Okay. One piece of advice you would give your younger self if you had to do this all over again. Imagine it's 98
Yeah.
and you have a chance to talk to to Anand Kumar of 1998.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice you would give him?
I would have forced myself to go to Valley much earlier.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, how much earlier?
At least in the moment I finished my law.
So at least get the flavor.
Yeah.
Because at 99 would have been a great time to be in the valley.
Absolutely. Because that really changed me, if you ask me.
Acha.
And that changed me, the concept there. Because I realized that even as a lawyer, I mean, there are two things. Like, one is that you have to, you can't just, I'm a lawyer, I can rent my so much of time.
Correct.
Right? And I be a legal professional all my life. But apart from that, if you're doing something different, how do you get that piece of the company?
Correct.
Is what I learned there. Maybe if I had learned that much before, I could have looked at things differently.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying that how lawyers have taken sweat equity versus charging?
No, not even if even if they were to invest in a company. My simple concept is that you put in money, and it grows while you're working as a lawyer. That
I
money
see.
is
Your
growing.
money's working for you while you're also working for money.
Yeah, the power of compounding. I
Correct.
never realized that in India, but I did when I went there. So maybe if I had gone that a decade
Very
back,
interesting.
it would have been very different. The way I
But would you
have approached
recommend founders to start investing, or should they wait for their first exit, or should they wait for their liquidity from their company before they start investing?
No,
Very recent phenomenon.
No, they can start investing.
You would recommend that?
I would recommend them, as long as they make it clear and it's all above board. There should not be any non-compete clause and all of that they need to cover up.
I see. One thing about the Indian VC ecosystem you wish you could change overnight?
Well, I would reduce the shareholders agreement size to 2 pages.
Really, is it possible?
It is. I think we'll have to do
I
something
think just
about
the
it.
definitions page itself.
We need
sets
to
itself-
remove everything. We
remove everything.
just have one big conciliation and arbitration clause. That's it. Very effectively drafted.
Really, that's it.
That's
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Oh my God, I think because especially as the startup gets bigger, the size of that SHA
Yeah.
only gets more and more daunting. Right?
Yeah.
Like people talk about, I read things before I go to sleep. I said I don't have the capacity to read anymore because some of these SHAs are effectively
And
the size of a book.
the problem is that we are over lawyering it, and also that's the biggest problem. The difference in the documentation I've seen in Valley in those drafts are that they don't reinvent the wheel, and they really mean by not reinventing the wheel. Here, when the SSH goes from one side to the other side, the wheel is completely khad ke bahar fek dete hain. What they'll come back will be completely different.
Yep.
So even if the draft which you see in Valley
Correct.
is actually, you will see that some of those sections are not even required there, but it will still be there. Everybody knows that it is there. It's not impacting this draft. Let's not touch that. Let's not get into
Correct.
But here it's not. It just, people go back and forth so many
But why
times.
do you think that is? Is it because, again, we've been in so many transactions where we send a term sheet, right? And we purposely make a very long, lengthy term sheet. This is something you and I agreed on.
Correct.
And we see that we'll send a long term sheet and we'll get like a term sheet back with like 100 comments on it.
Correct.
As if we've given an English paper.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And negotiation on clauses that have nothing to do with
Correct.
the running of the company.
Correct.
Right. And just like they're trying to understand what we're trying to say. Versus just understanding that this clause is as the way it's written.
Correct.
And that's just normal process. That's how things are done.
Yeah.
Is that just because other lawyers need to justify their fees, or what do you think that is?
No, it's not even that. I mean, even that is not there, that justify the fee. Because that, number one, it's difficult to justify because mostly they're all fixed fee basis nowadays, right?
Achha.
So you're not charging per hourly. Sometimes I'm really surprised at why are they justifying? They don't need to justify that.
Correct.
So one of the reasons I feel is that, it's like, for example, I have to, let's say, draft a document in oil and natural gas practice.
Correct.
So there are certain things in relation to that oil and gas, which I don't know about it.
Correct.
I just go into the draft and I start, working on the draft without knowing what I'm doing. I'll come with random useless comments, right, which is not required there. I think that is what happens. So there are a lot of people who are, Johnny come lately, and those are the kind of people who think that, I have to do a value.
Correct.
I have to contribute in the draft, which is not required. And nobody would know that because, things get lost in the translation.
But don't you think it's time, like just like the US has the SAFE agreement?
Yeah.
Right? We all as investors agree on a single SHA.
Yeah.
Right? And that is the SHA moving forward.
So I think,
because I've seen sometimes, and sorry to cut you off here, but I've seen sometimes that so I'll have the same legal firm on the opposite side.
Yeah.
When I send them an SHA, right, which is drafted by you or by another legal firm, they will come back with objections to clauses. But when they are on the other side, which is they're on my side,
correct,
they are putting the exact same clause,
correct,
and they have no objection to that.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
It's a very paradoxical,
absolutely,
relationship.
Absolutely.
Which is why maybe I'm being a bit crude over here, but I feel that sometimes they're trying to justify their fees by just by just objecting to everything.
Yeah.
Mostly like the Indian Parliament, right?
Yeah.
Object to everything.
Correct.
Right? Is that? I mean, how can we stop this practice?
Yeah, because as I said that justification of fees does not even come into picture, largely because I told you most of these are fixed fee.
Correct.
I think it could be more than that. It could be maybe satisfaction of the ego that look, we've changed the draft. I mean, what's the point in the redlining a draft just for the heck of redlining a draft?
Correct.
So it's always a better idea that what Y Combinator came with a safe document. If we have things like that, we cut down the size of most of these documents. It is a lot more important.
It will move deals much quicker.
It will move deals much quicker, absolutely.
I definitely think that's something that we should change about.
That's right. Sometimes, like the transfer of shares between two parties.
Correct.
You don't need a very long share purchase agreement. I see share purchase agreement, you can just file a form, which is the minimum requirement of the Companies Act.
Correct.
And do it and move on. Right?
No, yeah, definitely. I've seen with requirements of,
correct,
all kinds of things to get done prior to.
That's right. And this this entire shareholders agreement, then it becomes part of the article of association, because that's how the company gets bound to it. So there is no end to all of these, really, if you ask me. Half of the definition sections are not even required. So we need to have a big, one day we need to all sit together.
We need to go all to a Goa house.
Yeah.
And you get us drunk.
Yeah.
And then get us to agree on one SHA and then we're done. Just moving forward, yahi chalega
yahi chalega aur kuch nahi chalega.
Okay. Couple of questions. One hobby of yours that isn't common knowledge.
Cycling.
Cycling. Oh, you cycle?
Yes.
That's not even common knowledge.
That's
for me.
what I
when
do.
Did this start?
It's been for years, but off late I'm getting into more actively into it.
Wonderful! Wow! Yeah. And this is in Goa. You're cycling
here in Gurgaon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gurgaon.
Yeah. Okay. Except on those bad smoky days.
Yeah. You're talking about the winters.
Yeah.
One book that you've recently read that left a deep impact on you.
I haven't read it I read it recently, and I keep reading that book again and again, and I recommend it to everybody. This book is called English August.
English August.
Okay. By Upmanyu Chatterjee.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the book about?
So basically, this guy, he joins civil services, and he gets posted to a god-forsaken district called Madna.
Acha.
And how he deals with the bureaucracy there. Eventually, he resigns and he leaves. He joins a private job. But the whole take on India is just amazing. I mean, every time I read, and I find it so funny, so interesting, and every time I always take something from the reading of the book.
So it's called Indian August?
It's called English August.
English August.
Yeah.
English August.
Yeah.
All right. And so I'm guessing this was set before 1947?
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a movie also. No, not 47. It was in 80s, I guess. 70s, okay. 80s, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right. And I think, let's see. You know what? I have one more question that I'm going to ask you. Let me see. Where do you see courtrooms going? Do you think we're going to have courtrooms? Do you foresee that we will eventually have virtual courtrooms? Like what's happening in the US?
Yeah. We will have virtual courtrooms. In fact, thanks to, COVID, in that sense of the word, that, the way India emerged, I am really surprised, the way India emerged during COVID. And I could never imagine that, people in remote areas doing these virtual courtrooms and coming on these, Zoom or Meet links and all of that, including the judges. In some of the ones in which I went there, I was very surprised that, they would seek assistance all the time, the judges in the beginning, and the courts will not start because, in few of the arbitration, it was impossible for judge to maneuver the whole thing. So he would just state an order that, okay, fine, we'll do it next time. But, this whole interoperability of the whole system during the COVID, because of, digitization. Now we have that, where you keep your Aadhaar and everything. What is that called?
DigiLocker.
Yeah. I think how efficiently government came with DigiLocker and everything, I think that has given a complete impetus to this. So we've already emerged so far ahead in that. I definitely see that happening.
Then comes my real question, actually.
Yeah.
That was just a precursor. Do you see, and this is happening in the US, where you've got generative AI fighting cases? Is that going to happen? Not happen?
Well, this is a very important question, AD, because I don't know how the camel is going to sit. Because generative AI, I told you in my last response also that it has to come with guardrails. So how effectively those guardrail comes for the generative AI, because you don't know where the infringement is happening.
Correct.
Unless and until that is protective, generative AI, I think that piece will take a bit longer.
What you're calling a learning language model, which means it learns, which means you put a guardrail, it should learn how to get across the guardrail.
Well, that is something which will be very interesting, because, you never know how. It also depends on how because, I've learned that with the learning language, the amount of emission it does, and there environmentally it is not, it's very, very degrading. So all of these things have to seen, the malicious content which is going to go, how things are going to come in the generative AI, which IP they are infringing, everything will have to looked into holistically. There I have my own sort of, I mean,
I think we'll
virtual.
leave that for another episode because
Yeah,
that could
maybe
go
we
on
can-
forever.
Yeah.
So I think it was a great episode. Thank you so much, Anand, for coming down. I really enjoyed this journey. It was definitely not something like that you generally hear, and I really enjoyed the answers to your questions. Thank you so much for coming. Any final words for the founders that are listening?
Please sign a founders agreement. I'll send you one.
Wonderful, guys. You can
Don't
find
break
Anand.
your new resolutions, and don't think it's a New Year resolution.
I completely agree. I again second that. There needs to be some sort of a agreement between founders, especially when things go south.
Right.
And you should decide that when things are going well,
Absolutely.
and not when things are already not doing well.
Yeah. And if the trust is broken, they need to sit and talk and not break each other's bones.
Yeah, perfect. I think with that, there's not a better way to end today's episode than this sage advice. I will be putting Anand's LinkedIn profile in the comment section, so you can go and ask him questions, and some of you guys can reach out to him and send him investment offers. Leave it with that. Thank you so much, Anand. Have a good night.
Thank
everyone.
you. It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.